Many sites that were considered to have been on the itinerary of the Israelis were excavated thoroughly and intensively for a long time now. No traces have ever been found. Now, this next paragraph I'm going to read is where it connects to my research. The biblical account of the destruction of Jericho is well known. One of the Arabic settlements in the Middle East had been arbitrarily identified as the biblical Jericho, whose walls were destroyed by the sounds of the horn. The horn is interesting too, because you just laughed because I know you're thinking Saturn too, like I am. The settlement has been a subject of thorough excavation since the endeavors of Selen, Watzinger, and Garstang in late 19th century. Now, Selen, Watzinger, and Garstang, interesting names, especially Garstang, because he is one of the founders of the British School of Archaeology in Jerusalem, which was co-founded with, I believe, Sir Frederick George Kenyon and Sir Isreal Gallant.
Didn't take us to get right back, and of course we've already discussed Isreal Gallant in the previous shows with Jacob, and that, you know, Isreal Gallant's nephew was
Victor Gallant.
Victor Gallant, who was the printer for the Fabian Society and for Aldous Huxley and all of those frauds that bleed right down into MK Ultra.
Oh yeah, I mean, this mass observation. Thomas Harrison has a few books underneath him.
Right.
I mean, so like it's just interesting. We're coming right back up in here, and FOMENKO, you know, he likes to talk about how in the 19th century, you know, this is kind of where everything kind of solidifies, and you're kind of seeing where history is kind of being the standard is being set. And you know, if we're going to try to find where the standard's being set, who was the empire at the time that had the most global control? Well, it's the British Empire, and we can see that. You know, these people, you know, associations are, I mean, you can go so deep with it. I mean, John Garstang, I'm just going to click on his name. Should I go on a share screen here so you can kind of see
Sure.
On my brain database? So right now I have John Garstang called up. Okay.
All right, there we go.
So there's John Garstang. He's responsible for the British School of Archaeology in Jerusalem.
Your video card is working overtime there, just so you know, but it is showing, but it's struggling.
Okay. He was the president or the director of the Department of Antiquities, which is developed under the Mandatory Palestine. He was responsible for the Jericho expedition. Now, the Jericho expedition was actually, let's go back to John Garstang quick, because you can see he's associated with Sir Frederick George Kenyon. As you can see, he's a decorated man with letters.
Yeah, your video card is really working hard there.
Maybe I'll just close the brain and I'll just use my web version of it, or I'll close the Safari.
Well,
actually, I'll close Safari. That one will probably be better to close.
All right.
So Sir Frederick George Kenyon, he is the president of the British Academy for a time. What's interesting is he's associated with Arthur James Balfour, who is also president of the British Academy, who is responsible for the British mandate in Palestine.
You're not suggesting that they did all this based on like fake history, are you?
Well,
or is it? Am I giving it away too soon?
Well, what I'm saying is that there seems to be a cell of people who are interested in creating a state in a land based off of biblical history, and this biblical history goes back and it's kind of tied to the chronology placed down by Joseph Scaliger, the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, the Roman Catholic Church is heavily involved in this, especially once the mandate is set in place.
Well, and then, obviously, Petavius and probably Scaliger as well were Jesuits, and then,
quite possibly. Yeah.
Well, Petavius was, and then, so this would show an interest with the Catholic Church in all of this.
Yeah,
and then you have the Council of Trent, which FOMEKO suggests was when they officialized the official Scaligerian chronology, and then forced that on to society.
Yeah, basically, I mean, they're using this to kind of force everything on everybody. I mean, all right, so we're talking about biblical archaeology, and remember we talked about the Isreal Stela with Sir William Flinders Petrie, and he was talking, and this is controversial, but he says that Israel was first mentioned on the Stela in Canaan or
Right.
Canaan.
Right.
So that translation is by consensus. It's not a fact. It's not proven. Okay, so this is one of the foundation pieces, and this is from Sir William Flinders Petrie, who founded the British School of Archaeology in Egypt. And he's an Egyptologist who, interestingly enough, was the teacher of Margaret Murray, and he was also the teacher of Gerald Lancaster Harding. And Gerald Lancaster Harding was one of the people who worked with Father DeVoe to create the team for the Dead
Sea Scrolls.
Which, you know, it also helps solidify this idea that there's a historical basis of the Bible being in Palestine.
Right. And then Allegro, and of course I'm Allegro's publisher, and Allegro was one of the original 8 on the Dead Sea Scrolls team. So Allegro puts together his own private team, and he goes around and digs in the desert and tries to find all of this stuff that's laid out in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Copper Scroll, and writes a book on it. You know what he found? Nothing. And I think Allegro was legit, and another reason why I think Allegro was legit and believed the historical veracity of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I was talking with his daughter about this the other day, but I think, you know, what happened was after enough years of research on the Dead Sea Scrolls, he's seeing all of this Bacchanalia stuff, all of the Dionysian worship that's embedded in it. And he's like, wait a second, you know, the Bible is covered, these ancient documents, when we go through this, is covered with this Bacchanalia drug sex worship stuff. And then he comes out with it, and they go ape shit attacking him, that, you know, he's completely lost his mind. But in Chapter 7 of FOMENKO's Chronology 1, he argues that the Catholic Church had to create the Dark Age to make it look like the Bacchanalia and the drug pagan worship throughout Europe was ancient history, and give the illusion, you know, and that and to cover up when the Inquisitions really were. He argues that it was like in the 15th or 16th century when the Inquisitions happened. So they create this Dark Age to shove history back, so that it makes it appear, you know, from the Saturnalian chronology point of view, that this is all ancient history. And then they have the Council of Trent, they rewrite everything, they present this new view, and then Allegro's like, you know, looking at these Dead Sea Scrolls going, wait a second, who is one of the guys who led the attack on him was Father DeVoe from the École Biblique, right?
Yes.
And they get, you know, they get Allegro thrown off the team, you know, and Allegro, they're having a conniption fit because Allegro, he's working with King Hussein of Jordan, and he's like best friends with King Hussein, and King Hussein's funding him. And then they're like, well, oh shit, and they have this little thing called the 6-Day War, and they take over all of King Hussein's stuff where the Dead Sea Scrolls are. So I think it's highly possible that John Allegro and King Hussein were inadvertently responsible for the 6-Day War because they had to hush up what, you know, Allegro and King Hussein were finding and putting out there, you know. So it makes this whole other interesting story. And Allegro, you know, I mean, Father DeVoe of the École Biblique, I used to have all the members of the Scrolls team in my head. I can't think of them right now. Father Millick, John Strugnell was Strugnell is who came in from Oxford replacing Allegro, and then of course he railed on Allegro some more, you know. But you know, if we can imagine that they manufactured the Dead Sea Scrolls and then planted them, and then Allegro does the search in the desert, publishes a book on it, doesn't find anything. And he's, you know, Allegro's the guy trying to bring all of the attention to the scrolls. And they're like, wait on, hold on a second. Allegro was the only source of the Dead Sea Scrolls that anybody had, and they were trying to hush them up the whole way up until 1993. And then you have Dr. Robert Eisenman at the University of Cal State Long Beach here in California, who then, working with the Huntington Library and Israeli sources, then circumnavigates the Dead Sea Scrolls team and has the Dead Sea Scrolls published. And Allegro is right there in the center of this, and Allegro is like, wait a second, it's all fertility drug worship. So when we look at this angle and why they needed to hush Allegro up in view of chronology and this possibility, it makes a whole lot more sense of why they attacked Allegro. You know, so we're already at the top of the hour. So go in and read these quotes, and we're already going overtime here. So
it's not our first time. But before I go to the Scaliger quote, while we're still on this, I have this speech by Father DeVoe called Les Archéologies et les Manuscrits de la Mémoire, which is the manuscripts of the Dead Sea Scrolls. This was a speech given at the Schweik Lectures of the British Academy in 1959. So this is like in the heat of when Allegro was trying to get everybody to start publishing, because he's like, hey, I have all this stuff. Let's get going. Let's do the Copper Scrolls. I want to do the Copper Scrolls. So this is given at the British Academy. And Constance Schweik is the daughter of Leopold Schweik. And she created the Memorial Fund, and she's one of the primary funders of the British Academy. And when she created that Memorial Fund, one of the things that was part of it was that there should be lectures given about proving the biblical history. So, we're looking at biblical archaeology, and we're looking at Palestine. We're looking at these groups, and they're associated, and they go back all the way, even back to the 1870s, before Israel was even started. And you can see that they're laying the foundations for trying to create this state. And it's, it's not, these aren't light words to say, but all the evidence just keeps kind of pointing back to Israel being a fabrication. Like a complete one.
Yeah.
And like I those are words that shouldn't be said lightly.
Yeah. But it appears that the evidence is really going in that direction, and so this is really important stuff that it's not like my channel's not already shadow banned. How do you